Welcome, everyone. Tzarayim Tovim, Boker Tov, good afternoon, good morning, wherever this may find you. Up here in the Galil, it's moving into dinner time. I just wanted to give one housekeeping note. Apologies for last week. I hope nobody came last week and expected a shiur, because I hope that that notice was given about there not being a shiur last week. Obviously, next week there will not be a shiur because it's Shavuot. Instead, though, of this series, I will be giving a short shiur on Erev Shavuot on Sunday as part of Torah in Motion's Yom Iyun series in anticipation of Shavuot. It's a short shiur. It's a half an hour shiur, just a little taste. Some of the milky sweetness.
What's the subject of the shiur?
A little bit. The subject of this shiur, I forgot what I named it. It's going to be about the Torah was only given. It's a quote from the Mechilta, and the quote translates as, the Torah was only given over to be learned, or to be lidrosh, to be delved into, to those who ate from the manna. To those who ate from the man.
Oh,
so we're going to be going.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, lo ochlei haman. Lo nibna haTorah lidrasha ela lo ochlei haman. Exactly. Okay. So that said, let's and I believe that that's going to be next Sunday. I know my slot is at 4:15 p.m. here, which I guess would translate into 11:15. Okay. Yeah, 10:15. 7 hours earlier. Math is not my strong suit. Okay, so
my emails if you have the option.
So,
okay. Put on your fucked up face. I don't.
Yeah.
It's in her car.
Just making sure everyone's on mute, and let's get started. I don't expect everyone to remember exactly where we were from 2 weeks ago, but I did want to wrap up our discussion of Shimon as the second son of Leah, the second son of Yaakov. And what we had explored up until today was Shimon's obsession with the integrity of Am Yisrael, with his sense of duty towards his family, his sense of building walls around his family, and ensuring that no negative influences, be they from Shechem or from his perceived negative influence of his brother Yosef, should enter into his family. And we explored why Yosef singled out Shimon to incarcerate him, and the entire midrashic motif of Shimon being the ringleader in the desire to kill Yosef, and saw that through a number of different midrashim and other apocryphal material. Now we're going to round off our discussion of Shimon with the end of Sefer Bereshit, the end of the book of Genesis, which is one of the important markers that we explore with every tribal personality. And the marker that we're looking at the end of Bereshit is, of course, the blessings of Jacob to his sons. In this case, it's less a blessing. I'm just going to ask everyone to please mute their phones or their computers. Yeah, Abba and Ima, I think that you might be, you have to mute your phone or your computer. Okay. Sorry about that. In this case, it's less of a blessing and more of a curse, like we saw with Reuven. And so let's see what Yaakov says to his sons, who he addresses as a unit. Shimon v'Levi achim. After Reuven had left, Shimon and Levi enter, and Yaakov says, the two of you are clearly two peas in a pod. You're clearly brothers. Obviously, they're all brothers, but the two of you think alike and act alike. Klei Hamas mecherotehem. Their weapons, and he addresses them in third person. Not you are brothers, but Shimon and Levi are brothers. Their weapons are translated here as tools of lawlessness, right? That they are that which they carry with them, or they deal with, they engage with, are weapons, and weapons that aren't used properly. Bisodam al tavo nafshi. In their counsel and when they engage in their schemes, let me not be included. Bikahalam al techad kevodi. In their assembly, I don't want to be considered. So Yaakov is removing himself from these two boys, from these two sons. Ki ba'apam hargu ish. In their anger, they killed a man. Ubirtsonam ikru shor. And in their passion, when it suited them, they hamstrung an ox. Ikru means to render useless. It can also mean to pull up or to uproot. But in this case, the simple translation is to maim, to damage the ox. Arur abham ki az. Let their anger be cursed, for it is strong. Ve'evratam ki kashata. And their wrath, their anger, should be cursed, for it is so, nice translation here of relentless. It is overwhelming. Achal kem b'Yaakov, va'afitzem b'Yisrael.
You froze.
Tamar, you're frozen.
In
Tamar, you're frozen.
Everybody with me? Are you with me? Am I back? Yes?
You were
Yes.
frozen before.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Great. All right, Yofi. So let's continue on. So this was clearly a language of a curse. And I'd like to look now at how the Midrash is going to diverge. It's going to, it's going to kind of see this singular curse that was leveled on Shimon and Levi together is going to kind of tease out separate elements of these two brothers, because at this point we're going to start seeing Shimon and Levi diverge from each other. So Shimon v'Levi achim ledina v'lo Yosef. So Shimon and Levi are brothers. Of course they're brothers, but what's being emphasized here, the Midrash says, is that true, you were brothers, you cared about the integrity of your family, but only to a point, only when it served you, only when it served your idealism, or your ideology, I should say. You were brothers to Dinah, but certainly not to Yosef, right? Now remember, this is a midrashic gloss, because nowhere in the text are Shimon and Levi singled out as responsible for wanting to kill Yosef. Textually, pshat, but this is a drash. Klei chamas mecherotehem. These tools should never have been yours as Erlecha Yidden, as sons of Yaakov. You should never have engaged in the kind of schemes that you did with Shechem, Yaakov is saying, and with Yosef. Rather, you should have left these tools of lawlessness to the ilk of Esav and evildoers. In his counsel, let me not come. Bisha'a shehin ba'im litol etza bishitim. Okay, so now here's where the Midrash starts to collapse text and collapse time and collapse narrative. So the text is saying that the Midrash is saying that what Yaakov is intimating here, bisodam al tavo nafshi, I don't want to be associated with future events that these tribes are going to be guilty of. In the case of Shimon, it's going to be the event that happens in the book of Numbers in Sefer Bamidbar, the story of Shittim, which we're going to get to in just a bit. Let me, the father Jacob, not be named in that context. I also don't want to be named in the context of Korach, which is a Levite-based story of evil doing. That Yaakov said, it's not just you in this life, Shimon and Levi, who have sinned. Your tribes will develop into sinning tribes. In the case of Shimon with Shittim, in the case of Levi, when it comes to Korach. Now, there's a switch back that Yaakov is making in his curse. Why do I want to separate my name from you? Why are you being cursed? Ki ba'apam hargu ish, because in their anger they killed a man. Who is this man? Chamor Avi Shechem, the king of Shechem. That they killed him, and in Yaakov's estimation, this wasn't a legitimate act. Ikru shor, and ubitsonam ikru shor. Now, the midrashic understanding here is a cartoon shuran shel gerim. What Shimon and Levi did was they undermined the shuran here, in the sense it's an Aramaic word that means a wall. They undermined the protective wall of converts. In other words, the image, if you remember, of Shimon's flag is of a wall, right? And in this case, it's one, if we're looking at it through the midrashic lens, it is a regular reminder of the damage that they did to Shechem. One could interpret it because it's art and you can interpret it openly. No one is binding you to a specific interpretation. There's no text that says this is how it should be interpreted. One could interpret the wall as a positive feature, that Shimon is worried about and concerned about the integrity of Am Yisrael and the walls that he insists on building to maintain that integrity. But in this midrashic turn of phrase, the wall is seen as something negative, in that there was a wall that Shechem had built around itself, a protective wall, not a literal wall, but a protective wall through Milah, through trying to reach out to Yisrael, to this family, to this clan of Jacob, through Milah. Then that was seen as by Chamor and Shechem as their protection against the anger of Dinah's family. But here, Yaakov is lambasting his sons for uprooting that wall, for undermining that protection that they should have kept in place. He was very upset, clearly, at what happened in Shechem. Just for the integrity of the text, let's just continue on, even though it's a little bit of a tangent. Bishvil la'asot ritzon yitzerchem akartam shuran shel gerim. In order to do your own will, Shimon and Levi, you uprooted, you undermined, you hamstrung, you damaged the wall of the proselytes that they were depending on. Now, this is the little tangent. The Midrash wants to say, ikru evus, that if you were to go to the Septuagint, which you know is the translation of the Torah that was commissioned in the 3rd century BCE by Ptolemy, Talmai, the Hellenistic Egyptian king, for his new library in Alexandria. And the story is related to us in numerous different texts, both extra Talmudic and Talmudic. So it was a very pivotal event, this translation of the Torah. And so in this case, the Midrash is referencing that translation, and it said that in this verse, when the rabbis, the 70 or 72 rabbis, were getting together to translate the Torah into Greek, they made certain changes, emendations, if you will, so as to kind of gloss over some of the more troubling aspects of the biblical verse. And this is one example. So instead of writing or translating ubertsonam ikru shor, and due to their will, they hamstrung an ox, which sounds very cruel to mutilate an animal, right? It seems very like a grave offense. To somewhat lessen the offense, they translated into Greek as ikru evus. They overturned the feeding trough, which is still a violent act, but not quite as violent as hamstringing, which is, cutting the tendons of the legs of animals to render them immobile and apparently very painful. This is just a midrashic gloss, so as to lessen the perceived offense here of Shimon and Levi. Finally, to round off the curse that Yaakov is levying on his sons, Achalkeim b'Yaakov, that I shall scatter them, I shall divide them among Yaakov, meaning that, as the Midrash says, Shivtosha Levi shall be, the Shevet of Levi shall not have a territory of their own, but rather they will have 48 different cities scattered throughout all of the Nachalot, all of the tribal allotments of the other tribes. Va'afitzem b'Yisrael, and I shall scatter them throughout Israel. Zeh shivto shel Shimon. Shimon too will be scattered throughout Israel. Hada amra ruban shel aniyim mishevet Shimon hayu. In the sense that Shimon ended up being a very impoverished tribe, though they were given a nachala, which we shall see, they were allotted a territory, and that's very clear in the book of Joshua, in the 19th chapter, that the 17 cities that they were granted, still, they're going to be so destitute that they will need to go schnurring. They will need to go begging throughout their brethren, throughout the other tribes. So this was, in all counts, a curse. This idea of this curse being leveled on both of them at this time is something that stays with the tribes until they make their own autonomous decisions to either live up to their ignominy, if I pronounce that properly, live up to their bad name, or to be mitaken, to redeem themselves, to fix themselves. And we'll see that great divergence between Shimon and Levi. I would like to point out here, Rashi brings a slightly different midrash on this complicated verse about hamstringing an ox, where Yaakov is saying, due to their will, they hamstrung an ox. Now, the ox, as in the first midrash in Bereshit Rabbah that we saw here, refers again to their destruction of Shechem. They maimed the ox, meaning they undermined the wall, sure, not meaning an ox in the rabbinic imagination, but meaning a wall. They undermined the wall that the Shechemites had built around themselves. Rashi wants to understand it slightly differently. And this is the beauty of midrashic association. Where else is Shimon and Levi guilty? Not only with Shechem, they're also guilty in the context of wanting to kill Yosef. And who is called a shor within Tanakh or within Chamisha Chumshei Torah? Yosef. In the very end of the Torah, in Sefer Dvarim, we have another set of blessings. We have the end of Bereshit, Yaakov's blessings, and at the end of Dvarim, in Zot HaBracha, we have Moshe's blessings. And when Moshe is blessing Yosef at the end of Sefer Dvarim, he calls him Bechor Shoro, Hadarlo, that Yosef is identified as an ox. Ratzu la'akor et Yosef. They wanted to uproot or damage Yosef. Shenikra Shor, who is called Ashur. So again, this collapse of text, right? Nowhere in Bereshit is Yosef called Ashur, but he is alluded to, as it were, within the curse or the blessing that Yaakov gives to Shimon and Levi, Ubirtzonam ikru shor. They sought to kill Yosef. They sought to uproot the bull, he who would later, by Moshe, be identified as a bull. By the way, if ox and bull mean different things, I apologize. Fauna is very much not my strong suit. Okay, so the Midrash kind of covers all of the misdeeds of Shimon and Levi in Bereshit through the curse that Yaakov levies upon them. Now, because this is a continuation of a shiur on Shimon, and we're going to get to Levi only after Shimon, let's see where Shimon picks up his storyline. It's only in the book of Bamidbar, in the context, as the Midrash had directed us to, of Shittim. Shittim is a city I had pointed out, the tell that is identified as Shittim in our virtual tour of Nachalat Reuven. Shittim is on the eastern side of the Jordan, and Bnei Yisrael are gathered in Shittim in the book of Numbers already, and they begin to sin, both through idolatry and through sexual promiscuity with the daughters of Moab and the daughters of Midian. And this is a story that we're familiar with from Parshat Chukat, the ends of Parshat Chukat. And God tells Moshe, and here I'm going to just, for time constraints, I'm just going to put it up here in English. I'll tell the story and you can read along. God tells Moshe, take all of the evildoers, make sure they are, and kill them. They should be impaled. And Moshe said, each of you tribes is responsible for killing your fellow tribesmen who have sinned with Baal Peor. Baal Peor is the pagan god that Bnei Yisrael were sinning with, and along with their sexual misdeeds with the Benot Moab and Benot Midian. Now we know what happens with this great showdown between Moshe Rabbeinu and a certain man. We're not told who he is in this context, just a certain Israelite man who brings a Midianite woman and brings in front of Moshe. And we're not quite sure exactly where they are in this verse. Just then a certain Israelite man came and brought a Midianite woman over to his companions in the sight of Moses and the whole Israelite community, who were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. They were crying in front of the Hechal. And then Pinchas sees this man with the Midianite woman. Clearly, they were engaged in intimacy. We know this from the subsequent verse. He followed them into the chamber and stabbed both of them, the Israelite man and woman, through the belly. And then there was a plague that had been leveled upon Israel, which we did not know about prior, that stopped. Those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. Now, this is a text that doesn't directly involve Shimon. This happens often in Torah, in Tanakh, where a story is given, and then only afterwards are we told the names of those who were involved. And we have this in the case, let me see if I brought the verse here. I did not bring the verse, but we have this right subsequent to this story. We're given the name of the sinning man and the Midianite woman who he sinned with. The man's name was Zimri ben Salu, me Shevet Shimon, Nasi Shevet Shimon. Zimri, the representative, the prince of Shimon, and he sinned with a woman named Cosbi bat Zimri. No, is it? I don't remember her name, but she was from Midian. She was a Midianite princess. Yes. Okay. So Cosbi bat Sor. Okay. So, trying to understand this story a little bit more deeply, the Midrash builds a backstory that will account for Shimon's involvement. Not just clearly the leader of Shimon was involved in this horrible affair, but also the entire tribe of Shimon were behind Zimri and were encouraging him on. And let's see how the Midrash kind of weaves this story in together. Vayomer Moshe el Shoftei Yisrael. Halach. So Moshe said to we had seen the previous source. Moshe says to all of the leadership of Israel, each of you is responsible for the evildoers in your tribe. Now, halach shivto shel Shimon etzel Zimri ben Salu. The Shimonites go to their leader Zimri, and they say to him, we're very unhappy with this. Amrulo, hein danin dinei nefashot va'ata yoshev v'shotek. They, meaning Moshe and his ilk and whoever might be in the leadership, are condemning Israelites to death, and you're not doing anything? Now, were they saying this because they themselves were guilty of worshiping the Baal Peor and of sexual misdeeds, misconduct with the Moabite and Midianite woman? Unclear. Maybe there was another motivation for them to be all outraged. What we know about Shimon is that they tend to be outraged, especially when it comes to a sexual misconduct. Perhaps, again, it's not clear whether they themselves were guilty of that sexual misconduct at this point. Amad v'kibeitz esrin v'arba elef mi-Yisrael. So Zimri gathers 24,000 men of Israel. Now, what we're going to see later on is that there was a census taken before this event at Shittim, and then a census taken after this event at Shittim. And we're going to see that it was Shimon that lost 24,000. I have the numbers. So where we were was with Zimri being galvanized by his tribesmen to approach Moshe. And I had mentioned that these 24,000 men that Zimri draws together to confront Moshe, we see that they were from Shevet Shimon because of the discrepancy in numbers. That originally Shimon numbered 59,300 prior to the sin, and then their numbers were drastically reduced, more so than any other tribe by far, to 22,200 after the sin. So the first chapter in Bamidbar, the census taken there, has a far greater number of Shimonites as compared to the census taken in the 26th chapter of Bamidbar after this event. So Zimri takes his group, and here we have the continuation of the story. Yes, he takes his 24,000, and he goes to Cosbi. Now, Cosbi is this Midianite woman. Amar le, hishameili. He says to her, sleep with me. Amra lo, and she says, nothing doing. Bat melachani, I am a princess. V'chein tziva li avi, and my father said that I am to sleep only with a prince, right? It's okay if I sleep around with an Israelite, but it has to be someone who ranks, a VIP. V'chein tziva li ami lo tisham'ei ela legdol shabahen. I have to find the biggest one, and that's my target. Amar le. Afhuna si shevet hu, v'lo od ela shehu gadol mimenu, shehu sheni labeten, v'hu shlishi labeten. He's talking about himself in third person, but he says, I too am a prince. Not only that, but I am a bigger prince than Moshe. Why? Because I'm from Shevet Shimon, and he's only from Shevet Levi. Who's the older brother? Who has primogeniture? Who has primacy? Shimon over Levi. So really, you should be sleeping with me. So the function here of this midrash is to start to develop a little bit more of a complexity of the story. This wasn't someone who was beset by lust, Zimri ben Salu. This is someone who is coming with an agenda, and he's coming with a tribal agenda, because his tribe is coming to him and saying, we're unhappy with this Moses making these kinds of claims about putting Israelites to death. What about the primacy of our tribe? We are older than Levi. We should be the ones with power. And so, Shimon, continuation of the story, Zimri grabs Cosby rather violently, almost like, it's not like he loves her. It's not like he's beset by lust here. He's trying to make a point. Tifasa bivlorita. He grabs her by her blorit. I love this word because it's a modern Hebrew word as well. And for someone, one of my hobbies is that I like to listen to Israeli music from like the 20s through the 50s and beyond, like this, classic Israeli music. And there's all of these songs that mention the blorit, because the blorit is like the huge tuft of hair that was very fashionable in 30s and 40s among the Palmachnikim and the Kibbutznikim. And it was almost became like a symbol of like the strong, new, unrestrained Jew, right? So I just find it a special delight that word is going to appear in the Talmud, when I had always thought of it as like such a, blorit. I thought it was a modern Hebrew word, but obviously Hebrew maintains a lot or retains a lot of biblical Hebrew and Talmudic Hebrew as well. Tfasa bivlorita. He grabbed her by her braids, or he grabbed her by her hair. And, he's parading her before Moshe. Hevia etza Moshe. Amarlo. Ben Amram. Right? Look at the condescension with which he addresses Moshe. Zo asura moteret. Is it okay if I sleep with her or not? Right? Now, I know I can't worship idols, but what's the problem with taking a Midianite woman in Tamar asura? If you're going to tell me that it's prohibited, hey, look in the mirror. Bat Yitro, mi hetira lach. Isn't your wife a Midianite also? Right? Zipporah, the daughter of Yitro, the priest of Midian, who allowed you to marry her? Nitalma mimena halacha. Moses was blank. He didn't have anything to say. Ga'u kulam b'tchiyah. This is what caused this great outpouring of crying. Because it was just as we have with Korach, the fellow tribesman of Moshe, challenging him. Here we have even a stronger challenge, right? Which is, it's a personal challenge to Moshe. How can you tell me not to sleep with a Midianite when you yourself have a Midianite as a wife? And it is a challenge to his leadership and his ability to legislate and make decrees. And it's at this point that Pinchas ben Elazar sees what's going on. So the Midrash again wants to create a backstory here that's going to remove any kind of sense that Zimri is just beset by lust, or even that the Shimonites are beset by lust. But this is a power play. This is some kind of a political statement that is being made. Now we know what happens. Pinchas, as we read in the Psukim, comes with his spear, Romach biyadav, and he stabs them through, as our sages say. I love this expression, in flagrante delicto, right? Right in the middle of their act, right in the otom makom, as they and he parades them out to Am Yisrael. Lots of parading going on here. Now, God is very pleased with Pinchas's act because God assesses that Pinchas here is not acting out of any kind of personal concern as a fellow Levi, as a fellow Levite towards Moses' a ruined honor here or damaged reputation, but he is acting in the name of God, l'shem shamayim, and he gets greatly rewarded here. In the aftermath, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen hishib et chamoti. I was extraordinarily angry with Am Yisrael for their flagrant idolatry and sexual misconduct, but he has calmed my anger. B'kanoet kinati b'tocham, in that he has exercised the zealousness that I feel within Israel. He exercised that zealousness, not exorcised, got rid of, but exercised he played on, he acted upon that zealousness. Due to him, lo chiliti et bnei Yisrael b'kenati. They were on the verge of being wiped out, but because he acted, then I will not destroy Am Yisrael. Chen amor hineni noten lo et briti shalom. So Pinchas specifically and his descendants will have my special covenant of peace, and that is where we get the kuhuna from, the descendants of Pinchas. Now, what we see here is a divergence. This is the episode where, if there had been intimations, as we'll see next week, where, in 2 weeks' time, when we get into Levi and we start discussing Levi, if there have been not even intimations, clear indications, once Levi becomes a tribe, no longer just a son of Yaakov, but a tribe, that Levi is turning the corner, that Levi is separating from Shimon, that Levi is acting in consonance with how God wishes him to act. Here in this episode, in Numbers, that is very, very clear, and it stands in stark contrast to Shimon. And the Ha'amek Tabar, the Netziv, here in his commentary on the verse of curse that Yaakov had leveled on Shimon and Levi, says the following: Shnei b'nei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi, that these two are they're indistinguishable at this point, right? And they have the same trait. Tevat Shnei b'nei Levi. The word Shnei is miutar; it's redundant. We don't need to know that there are two sons. Just say b'nei Yaakov, Shimon v'Levi. We can count Shimon and Levi. Why is there this redundancy of saying two sons? We have another context where we have two brothers, Nadab Avihu, and they're not called Shnei Bnei Aaron, the two sons of Aaron, Nadab Avihu, but rather Nadab Avihu. Why here are they called Shnei Bnei Levi? And this comes to teach us something very profound. Even though they were of one mind, united in great anger, to destroy an entire city, and they also were united to bring upon themselves a great danger in doing so. Mikol makom hayu shnayim. Nevertheless, Yaakov here is intimating, though I am going to curse you together, and it will take a very sensitive ear to tease out a future divergence between you, nevertheless, you are two, meaning each of you is distinct from the other. You might not be able to tell it right now at the end of Bereshit, but you will grow very distinct from each other. Hainu sheshonim hayu. In that they will be very different. Shnei b'nei Yaakov, shonim, different. The word shnayim and shonim essentially is the same thing. It means two. It's a split. It's a difference. It's a singularity. So they will be very different in their in knowing the power, the fiery power of this fire, right? In how they should apply this anger and this zealousness that they have. One is coming from this great righteous indignation at avenging the honor of his familial house. Whether the familiar house is Jacob's familial house, or whether the familiar house is Shimon's own tribal house, the umbrage, the outrage, the righteous indignation that Shimon feels is that fire that burns within him. Someone who brings a fire like this is playing with a dangerous fire. It's a foreign fire. It's a fire that has no place within Am Yisrael. And the latter, or the second one, is coming with the knowledge of this passion being used as a zealousness. It's the fine line between jealousy and zealousness. And I'll articulate that in just a bit. Bli shum pniyav ratzon, hi esh shel hevet ya. If someone is coming without any kind of personal ego involved, but is fighting the good fight, so to speak, then that is the flame of God. There's a razor thin line that separates the zealousness from jealousness. It's just that one little letter. But that's what the Hamic Davar is pointing out here. And he says, even this fire, even Pinchas's passion, is something that we have to take great care of, right? Remember that the Rambam, in identifying different traits, says kas has no place. It's something that we don't find the right place for kas in our lives. It's something that we have to always work to try and combat. So even kas b'shem shamayim, even that righteous indignation that's truly righteous, that Pinchas demonstrated for the sake of God, we have to take great care with l'chavein hamakom b'hazman, to channel it in the right direction, the right place, and the right time. Ublozeh he mekalkelet harbe. And Nitziv is saying even that zealousness on the part of Levi can be greatly damaging. But he does point out here the differences between the two tribes that are almost embedded, or he says embedded in the language of the blessing that Yaakov, or the curse that Yaakov gives to these two tribes, though a less seasoned or less sensitive reader might not have seen the possibility for divergence until it actually happened later on in Israel's story. Now, what happens with Shimon after their numbers are greatly actually, you know, before I get to that, I did say that I wanted to articulate this difference between Shimon and Levi. And I will do it just by reading a paragraph, two paragraphs about the difference, about this difference that the Ha'amek Davar, that the Nitziv, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin is pointing out here. Right after Pinchas had done what he did, here was where the two brothers dramatically diverged. The trait of kanaut, which means zealousness, which surfaced earlier with Levi and Shimon together in Shechem, and it surfaces here, it was pure in one brother and sullied in the other. Pinchas was the paradigmatic kanai, right? We saw that he was zealous for the sake of God. Bikanoet kinati bitocham. And this is what God identifies Pinchas as achieving for Am Yisrael. He was zealous for the honor of God, whereas Zimri was zealous for his own tribal honor. While coming from similar roots, his was far removed from the zealousness, from the kina of Pinchas, which is something that is an act of love, of trying to strengthen the relationship between God and his people. And I'll just have a few more lines on this. Jealousy, that's Shimon, is petty and hostile. Zealotry is noble and ultimately seeks peace. It was with zealous Pinchas that God forged his covenant of peace. A jealous character does not value the glory inherent in the distinctiveness of his friend and wants to abrogate the other's gifts in favor of himself. Why should you, Moshe, be the litigator? And why should you have Zipporah? I am the older one. I am jealous for the honor of my tribe, and that is why I, Zimri, am acting. A zealous character, in contrast, glorifies in the uniqueness and greatness of the other. A fine line divides jealousy from zealotry, but that exacting distinction makes all the difference in the world. And that is where these two tribes, one who's going to become known as the singular, glowing servant of God, the Levites, diverges so greatly from a tribe that is all but written out of the confederation. What do I mean by that? That he is all but erased from the confederation. If we go to the end of, where are we here? Yeah. If we go to the end of Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and we go to that other important marker of the nature, the character of a tribe, which is the blessings that Moshe gives to the tribes, we'll find something very curious. We'll find that all of the tribes get a blessing except for Shimon. Shimon is absent in Moshe's blessing, which is very startling, right? I would say that like almost like, you'd have to be looking like to say, where's like, it's not something that I think everybody even notices, although it is, because the tribes aren't given their blessings in birth order, but he's missing. And so, of course, the Midrash wants to notice that he's missing, comment on the fact that he's missing, but even more so, because Shimon doesn't disappear from the biblical narrative, but he will be found in Yehoshua and Shoftim and all of the Sfarim, and he'll be around even in the days of Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Shimon is mentioned as a tribal entity, so he doesn't just disintegrate within Chamisha Chumshei Torah. So Chazal want to find his bracha somewhere, and where are they going to find his bracha? Embedded or hidden within the blessing of Yehuda. So in the words vizot liYehuda, and this one for Yehuda, right? This for Yehuda, and then this isn't really explicated very clearly in the ensuing words. So the Sifrei, the Midrash Halacha on Dvarim, says the following: Milamed shenitpalel Moshe al shivto shel Shimon. Moshe did pray for the tribe of Shimon. He might not have warranted his own bracha because of how deeply he had sunk. Amar lefanav Ribono Shalom, kol zman sheshivto shel Shimon sharoi b'tzar umitpalel lefanecha ata ma'ale oto mitocha. Every time that Shimon is burdened and is troubled and prays before you, then rescue him, alleviate him from this. And how will you do that? Ve'el amo tivi'enu. This is a continuation of the blessing that Moshe gives to Yehuda, right? We're all in the context of the Yehuda blessing. And you should, and to his people you should bring him. Who's his people, and to who should be brought? Shekarvo imo lebracha. Shekirvu imo lebracha. That Shimon should be drawn close to. Yehuda will draw Shimon close to him in blessing, just like Yehuda receives abundant blessing. Then Yehuda should be responsible for Shimon. Yehuda will carry his brother and share of his blessing with his brother. And we see this very, very clearly in the very opening verses of the book of Shoftim, of the book of Judges, in the aftermath of the death of Joshua, when the people, when Am Yisrael are unclear who should lead them, and they inquire of God, who shall go forth with us? Yehuda Ya'aleh, Yehuda shall be the vanguard in future conquest. And what does Yehuda do immediately? He turns to Shimon. Vayomer Yehuda leShimon achiv. He turns to Shimon, his brother. Obviously, we know that they're brothers, but they're brotherly. There was a Philadelphia. There was a brotherly love. I think I said that right. Alei iti begorali. Come with me in my lot. I want you to partner with me. And so because we have this verse in Shoftim, the sages have the room, the space to read Shimon's bracha back into Yehuda's bracha, because later on, Yehuda is going to say, Alei tid b'gorali, go up, Shimon, with me, accompany me. And so we can see that if we want to find Shimon's bracha, it would be in Yehuda. More than that, obviously, is the fact that Shimon's nachala is embedded within the nachala of Yehuda. It is surrounded on the north and the east and the west. The north, the east, and the south, really, because this is more Philistine area, by Yehuda. And so, and these contours of the Nachala are delivered to us in the book of Joshua. These 17 cities allocated to Shimon are within the Nachala of Yehuda. So again, giving good reason for the sages to seek a connection between Yehuda and Shimon beyond that which we see textually in the book of Judges. So they're going to search deep into the blessing. Let me just end with a couple of more points. Before, here we go. Sifrei. Okay. This is a really lovely little Yalkut Shimoni, which I found in the context of learning Sefer Shoftim, which points out another aspect of Shimon's marginalization after Shittim. Not only were his numbers, severely decimated, not only was he not blessed by Moshe, but look at what the Yalkut points out here. Mikol hashvatim yatzu shoftim umlachim. All tribes produced judges and kings. That's not entirely true, but it seems like you want to have their 12 judges listed in the book of Judges. It would be nice if we could allocate one per tribe. Doesn't work out that way. But anyway, all of the tribes were represented in the leadership of Israel subsequent to the death of Joshua. Except for Shimon, who wasn't able to produce a judge or a king because of the sin with Zimri. He wants to learn, something somewhat homiletic here, I guess, that this tells us how dangerous sexual promiscuity is, because look at the ramifications. Shimon was just kind of marginalized and sidelined. Now, a couple of more points. When we had seen that Midrash on the curse that Yaakov had given to Shimon and Levi, the Achalkem b'Yaakov va'afitzem b'Yisrael, I shall divide them among Yaakov and scatter them among Yisrael. Rashi brings a really, really interesting insight, which I was not able to source in Midrashic literature. The Medrash in Bereshit Rabbah had said the reason why Shimon, or how is that going to be manifest, that Shimon is going to be scattered amongst the tribes. We understand Levi, because Levi doesn't have a Nachala. But Shimon, we saw, he has his Nachala. What does it mean he's going to be scattered among the tribes? I'll remind you that the Midrash said he's going to be so impoverished that he's going to have to go around begging. Right? Now, Rashi expands on this a little bit, right? He says, Ein lach aniyim v'sofrim u'melamdei tinokot ela mishimon. That you're not going to find any better example of a poor person and scribes, who I guess also, have to eke out their living, and school children than school teachers, than the tribe of Shimon. Shimon was responsible for producing the school teachers. And I had a what I think is very interesting insight on Shimon, the school teacher. Like, why would Rashi have put that in? Now, of course, one can say, okay, Rashi was just as aware of his of the reality as we are. We know what kinds of salaries school teachers make. And so, like, if you want to talk about the prime example, a paradigm of a poor person in Israel, you're going to talk about the, fourth grade teacher, right? The school teacher. But I thought of a slightly different take on that, on Rashi's insight here. What does it take to be a good teacher? Not a lecturer. Lecturers it's much easier, right? I've been trying a little bit to volunteer to teach English to some of the kids on my moshav, like the elementary school. Chapeau, that's how you say in Hebrew, hats off, right? Chapeau to every single school teacher out there, because it is not only a thankless task, it is so much more difficult than lecturing. What does it take to be a good teacher? Communication skills, clearly, and a mastery of the material. Most critically, though, a teacher must be passionate about what he or she is teaching in order to inspire the students, right? To inspire, especially, could you imagine inspiring a 7th grader? I don't even know how that, I think it's just an amazing profession. The older I get, the more I realize how difficult it is to be a teacher of younger students. Shimon perhaps was given the role of the national school teacher because he was passionate. Young, impressionable minds react strongly and positively to an instructor who fully embraces the pedagogical role with an excitement. to introduce young students to Torah. We want someone whose teaching is heartfelt on the job, and Shimon fit the bill. I mean, he definitely was. So I call this a little bit of like an exegetical gloss on Rashi, but I think that makes sense given what we know of Shimon's character. Now, I'll add the final note before I take any questions, which is a little bit of a summary, and then this final note. What we've learned of Shimon over these last few shiurim is that Shimon is someone who is zealous and jealous for the integrity of Am Yisrael, for the reputation and honor of Am Yisrael, to ensure that there aren't any kinds of dangerous elements infiltrating Am Yisrael. We saw how this trait of impassioned zealousness devolved as Shimon developed into a tribe. It devolved into jealousness for his own position within the family structure, and the devastating outcome of Zimri's act, which perhaps was motivated by this let's say provincial and parochial sense of the primacy of Shimon's tribe over Levi, and how the tribe never quite recovered from its fall. However, it did survive, and though it wasn't blessed by Moshe, the blessing is hidden within the blessing of Yehuda, who, I'll bring it full circle, because obviously this is another important point, was the one who took responsibility for Shimon in the first place, right? When he was, when in the stories of Genesis, when he took Benjamin from Yaakov's house to Egypt so as to rescue Shimon. So that bond was formed there, whether the brothers were aware of it. It reached to fruition in the tribal development. And my last point was brought to me when I was in conversation with a good friend of mine, Chani Tannenbaum, about what it's like when you have these 12 tribes, a few more if we're going to count Menashe and Ephraim, each with their own personality. And there are some tribes that are darker and let's say produce like a kind of shadow for Am Yisrael. Not every tribe is Yehuda. Not every tribe is Levi. Not every tribe is Ephraim for all of his complications. But what do you do with the tribe like Shimon? And she directed me to this beautiful teaching in Mesechet Kritot, this idea. Amar Rav Chana bar Bazna, Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida. Kol ta'anit she'ein ba miposh'ei Yisrael, ayena ta'anit. Sharei chelbena recha ra, u'mina'a ha'katuv im simanei ketoret. There is no such thing as having a minyan or having a fast day where you're going to call people together for a minyan, or having an event within Am Yisrael where that doesn't include the sinners. Now, all of us are sinners. So, we could just try and, and make this, very what I mean to say here is that there's the sinning element has to be present, not just excusing it by saying we're all sinners, but no, even if you're dealing with someone who has grievously sinned, he is still part of Am Yisrael. He's still present. Where do we learn this from? The Ketoret had very specific, the incense had very specific ingredients, and one of them was a horrific smell, the smell of chelbena, galbanam, and it had to be included in the Ketoret to teach us that it takes all kinds to form the glory of Am Yisrael. The chelbana is necessary, that off smell is necessary in a way to produce the gorgeous scent of Ketoret. Sometimes you need something a little bitter, a little wrong, a little off to bring out the wonderful end result. Abaye Amar mehacha ba'gudato al eretz Yisada. And this verse is from Amos. It drives this point home. he established his aguda, his federation, his bundle, his grouping together on this earth, even with Shimon, even with the Chabana, even with the Poshei Yisrael. Obviously, Poshei Yisrael can redeem themselves, and obviously Shimon did redeem themselves and was included as part of Am Yisrael. He wasn't kicked out of Am Yisrael. So with that message of the glory of Am Yisrael being enhanced by having all elements of Am Yisrael united, I will go to any questions. You just see if there have been any comments. Chat. Shimon Peres was a leader of Yisrael who did not become a shofet because of his first name Shimon. Okay. I have a biography of Shimon Peres, which might argue that point. But yes. Are there any other questions on Shimon? And if not, there is one more point that I do want to make, although obviously if you have to leave, you can leave a point, because I always try to talk about the relationship of the tribe and his Nachalah. So I spoke about why he is in Nachalat Yehuda, because of that intense and intimate relationship between Shimon and Yehuda. But there's another beautiful idea that I found as to why Shimon would specifically be there. For those of you who have gone to this area, this is the area around Beersheba. It's the Negev. It's not a place that is, very, it happens to have turned into the breadbasket of Israel, but it wasn't a place that was heavily settled, and it wasn't really considered to me the most, if you had to look at the most beautiful places, that wouldn't be the area. However, there is an idea that I saw by Rav Eliyahu Malai, who said the following. He said, there's a saying in Baba Batra that he who wishes to become wealthy, Misha Rotzeli Yashir Yatzpin. You want to become wealthy, you head up north. Misha Rotzeli Yachim Yadrim. If you want to become wise, then you go down south. And I think about this in terms of modern Israel, and I think about how David Ben-Gurion was so intent on taking the barren south and making the desert bloom. What he meant there really was applying the Yiddish cup, right, the Jewish ingenuity to improving difficult conditions. So Misha Yachim Yadrim, whoever wants to become wise should go south. I'll just read a couple of lines here, and with this we'll end. The south, which is the permanent home of Shimon, exemplifies the uniqueness of Israelite wisdom, its focus and distinctiveness. The distinctive wisdom that comes from being up against the wall, being up against all odds, being up against a barren desert and trying to figure out how to turn it into the breadbasket of the country. Wealth and materialism mark the connection and similarity of Israel with the other nations, but Shimon, who is associated from his very outset with the trait of zealous passion for the special sanctity of the Jewish people. What's different about the Jewish people? The Yiddish cup, the ingenuity, the startup nation. And for his concern for the paradigm of Israel as an Am Levadad Yishkon, as a nation who dwells apart with little association with other peoples. Therefore, he especially belongs in the South. I thought that was a beautiful insight. A region where the specific type of Jewish ingenuity could be applied, and things didn't come so easily. So with that, yes, like Gush Katif was. Thank you, Varda. Exactly. Gush Katif is an example of the Yiddish cup at work, at applied ingenuity to turning sand and the desert into greenhouses, into marvelous fertility. And even though I guide the Jezreel, I don't guide the South anymore. I guide Emet Yisrael, which was the original breadbasket of Israel. Now the South is by far, the Negev is by far the breadbasket of Israel and the most productive area of Israel. And for that matter, one of the most fastest growing populations of Israel around Ben Gurion University and around Beersheba. Whose source was the last that I just read? It was from Rev Eliyahu Malai, And I had actually found it online on a Hebrew website. And if you do a search for Elio Malai, Mem Aleph Lamed Yud Mali, for Nachalat Shimon, then you'll find that resource. I thought it was, and I translated it from Hebrew into English.
It's
So-
interesting, isn't it, that Rabbi Shimon Hasidah was defending himself in that Gemara in Chisot. Shimon Hasidah.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
Shimon.
right?
I'm a
Right?
Chassid, even though my name is Shimon.
I also find that very, very interesting how their name, like the name Shimon is a very august, very, very proud Jewish name. Now, the personality of Shimon, the son of Yaakov and the tribe of Shimon was probably of all of the Shvatim, the most marginalized, followed probably by Dan, which, when we get to the darkness of Dan, then, but these are names that were very, very prevalent in the Tannaitic and Amoraitic periods. They were the names of the Nesiim, Shimon ben Gamliel, and these were very, very proud names. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Anyway, yes. So, okay, everyone, if there are no more questions, then I will say the Hitraot.
Thank you so much.
My
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Thank
Chag
you.
Sameach, and I hope I get the chance to see some of you on Sunday, Erev Chag. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.